David has set it up really well, but I'm sure, Karim Benzema will be thinking, hey, listen, just because one French striker blanked today doesn't mean it's going to happen tomorrow as well. Don, this is the first time Inter Milan have beaten AC Milan in the Champions League knockout stage. Just brilliant from them, the way they managed everything across 180 minutes.
Yeah, you have to say over this season, the form has been with Inter rather than Milan. I mean, Scudetto champions last season. As I said before, Super Cup of finalists, and they beat Milan 3-0 in that game. Their run recently in Serie A, they're unbeaten, I think 5 or 6. And I think Milan are scratching. I think we touched on it at the start of the show. The lack of investment, I think, really showed. They were effectively down to 10 men when they tried to start with Leao because he was non-effective tonight. And then I talked about the substitutions. This is an Inzaghi trend the last couple of months where he takes, the front two off. He brings Lukaku on. Martinez was on at this point. He got the vital goal. Then Correa came on. Then Gosens came on. But this was it. This was the goal they wanted with about 15 minutes to go. And that was it. And everyone knew inside the stadium that it was going to be Inter's night. And they were going to go to the Champions League final. Amazing for Inter fans.
Who would have thought at the start of the season Inter Milan are going to be in the Champions League final, considering the fact they had Bayern Munich and Barcelona in the same group. David, I have to be naughty. Could the goalkeeper have done better there?
I'm glad you brought that up, Manas. The problem there for Magnon is when Martinez hits the ball, there's actually a dip on it. It's very difficult to see, but there's a little dip on it. And because he's so close, Magnon is having to make what essentially is a reflex save. If Martinez had hit that cleaner, it would have been a save, I'm sure, by Magnon. I wouldn't blame the keeper at all. And also, as well, Martinez, he's a pretty good player, Manas, to score in the Champions League semi-final. So no fault with the goalkeeper. And Magnon, in fact, had, as we said at half-time, he had a fantastic game again for AC, but his heroics were just not going to be enough against an Inter side who, as I say, looked comfortable for 180 minutes.
Of course, he's a really good striker. That's why he scored 25 goals this season, 10 assists, and he's won the World Cup as well. Don, if he hypothetically wins the treble with Inter Milan, I'm going to be naughty over here. There's a certain award which is called the Ballon d'Or, right? Can he be part of the conversation?
Well, yeah, but we have this conversation every other week, don't we? It's like, if Real Madrid win it, then it's Benzema. If someone else wins it, it's someone else. But yeah, right, it's worth putting Lautaro in the conversation. Absolutely. I mean, Champions League winners, if they can try and, they've got a long way to go to try and find out who they've got to play in the final. The great thing, I think, for Inter tonight is they can enjoy their night. They can have, some red wine. They could sit back and have some food. Then come tomorrow, I'm not even sure if they'll do a session tomorrow. And then all of a sudden, the team might get together tomorrow night. They're going to watch Man City versus Real Madrid. So I think for the first two teams that go first and Inter now in the final, it must be an amazing position where they now can kick back, relax, and just watch the final with no pressure whatsoever. No analysis needed. You're at the final. The analysis will come another day. Enjoy yourself tonight and then enjoy the game tomorrow.
Well, gentlemen, we have to analyze, of course. We have to analyze Inter Milan. So many free transfers. We mentioned that Mkhitaryan was a free transfer for them. The list goes on and on. Onana was on a free. Lukaku is on loan. Çalhanoğlu is on free. Edin Dzeko for such low fee. David, 7 of the 11 starting members of Inter Milan side tonight cost less than 11 million. 11 million. Just 11 million.
Yeah, it's a wonderful story. And as we're talking about at the beginning of the show and looking at the figures of the other three teams in the semi-finals or before the semi-finals tonight, if you can shop smart, you can get good players. Obviously, free transfers, you'll give them more in wages. So there is a caveat to all this, and not everyone's on level wages. But when you've got the likes of Onana, Mkhitaryan, as I said, who's had 1.5 fantastic semi-finals, Çalhanoğlu, who's again all of them, and Dzeko. I mean, everyone in that starting 11 had a fantastic game. So yeah, the position, like Don said, they can relax as well because they're in a good position in the league. AC Milan, had they gone through, would still have to worry about qualification through the league if they don't win the title. So they've got a double bonus now plus a treble. So everything is going in the right direction for Inter, and those free transfers or small fees, as you talk about, have had a massive contribution to what looks like a spectacular season for them.
Absolutely. What a season it is turning out to be for Inter Milan. And joining us live from San Siro, Julian, if you can hear me, I know this was your first Milan derby. How was that like?
Manas, I'm really sorry. I can't. The sound here is still so loud. There's still probably like all the Cubano where all the ultras from Inter are still there. It's still completely full. Behind me as well. I don't know if you can't see, but it's full as well. I can't hear properly. It's been one of the best atmospheres I've ever seen in a football match. I won't lie. We talked about it before the game with Adriano, and it was just incredible. The whole atmosphere, the whole stadium. To be fair, the Milan fans did their bit as well, the 7,500 of them. But the Inter fans were something else today. I heard David and Odon saying the best team won, of course, they did, over the two legs. The best squad won as well, because I don't think you can reach the Champions League final with Krunic and Junior Messias and Origi coming off the bench and Telemakers coming off the bench. I think also the best manager won tonight, because I was very disappointed by Pioli's tactics, not making changes earlier, not doing something to try to come back into this tie. So overall, an incredible night here for the Interisti, for Simone Inzaghi, of course, the third final this season, for Romelu Lukaku, of course, and Lautaro Martinez, you mentioned, and you showed his start this season pretty incredible. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, Manas, because I didn't hear it at all. But yeah, that's how I feel here in the stadium.
Of course, you answered my question really well, and I can hear you. I'm going to be louder. I'm going to be more louder, Julian. But can you tell me how loud exactly it was when Lautaro scored the goal?
I will tell you, Manas, the ground under my feet was shaking. It was shaking, I promise you. It was so loud. Then everybody standing up. I mean, they were all standing up anyway, but like singing, if you don't jump, you're not an Inter fan. If you don't jump, you're not an Inter fan. And then the floor shook again. And I was like, whoa. Let's be careful. This is an old stadium. It was incredible, really. And of course, it's a semi-final of the Champions League. There won't be another occasion like this in a very long time. We said the last time those two clubs met at this stage was 20 years ago. So of course, the occasion was very special. But you know, the ultras here, the Inter fans have been waiting a long time since going back to a Champions League final, since 2010. It's a very long time, 13 years for a club like this. So you can just imagine, even if they were 2-0 up from the first leg, there was something very special in the air. We arrived very early, fans were in very early, which doesn't happen in every country. And then the atmosphere was building up and building up and building up, and they never stopped singing. And again, the Milan fans did their bit. The Inter fans tonight were something else, something very, very special.
But what was wrong, Julian, with AC Milan tonight? They were second best for sure. The plan A didn't work, and it felt like, Julian, they didn't have a plan B.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's great to have Rafael Leao in your team, but if he's not fit, if he hasn't played for a couple of weeks, and if he plays against the back five, so he would always have either Dumfries or Damian, sometimes even Çalhanoğlu around him. It's difficult, and to be fair, he waited, I think, 6 minutes before touching the ball, and he lost it straight away. Then he had that chance that went just wide, but then that was it. The second half, there was no Rafael Leao. And the plan really was give the ball to Leao and hope for the best. If Brahim Diaz scores his chance early on, maybe that changes something. But he didn't, and overall, they were second best, you're right, from start to finish. The key players didn't really turn up. No Theo, no Rafael Leao, no Giroud, no Tonali, really. The others are not good enough, clearly. And the Inter team were in control for pretty much the whole game. And I think there was nothing really with the starting 11 that Pioli could have done differently. And I was disappointed because I thought maybe he's going to go to a back three. Maybe he's going to put another forward somewhere. He's going to do something different, just to try something different. And he didn't even do that. So overall, quite disappointing night from Milan. But I think they were predictable. And we kind of saw before the game that they were going to be predictable and that they needed something very special to beat this Inter side and to come back in the time. But they had nothing special tonight.
Julian is going to be flying over to Manchester. He's going to be collecting his frequent flyer miles. But Julian, Inter, the way they have played today, who do you think Inter would want in the final? because of their style, their pattern, their three in the middle of the park, their back three, their wing backs, and the big man, small man up top. Who does Inter favor? I'm sure it's not an easy answer because both the teams, Real and Manchester City, are just so good.
Yeah, you're right, but it's a really good question because if you think forward of the final, I think this Inter side would cause a lot of problems or some problems to Manchester City. For sure, I think it will be more of an even battle against Real Madrid, where maybe there's not much intensity, there's not so much tempo. And this Inter side can play with tempo and with intensity, but they're also very happy at times to just control the pace of the game, put the ball on their feet. I mean, Brozovic came on, and I think he helps even more controlling the game. But Çalhanoğlu, Barella, Brozovic, they're wonderful players. Mkhitaryan, of course. In terms of controlling the game, they're very good at that. Even at the back, Acerbi at his age, after everything he went through, the way he controlled the game today was fantastic. So I think they would rather Real Madrid than City, of course, because Real Madrid play in a way that I think Inter would prefer. That doesn't mean that they would be favourite, but I think it would be a tempo that they prefer. Whereas against City, it would be a bit different, I think. But I think they can cause City problems, and I think they can cause Real Madrid problems. And right now, I think Inzaghi will tell his players, we don't care who we face, because we know that we will be a problem for either of those two teams. And that's why I think the final, in a way, is better with Inter in it than if it was Milan.
Julian, thank you so much for your time. I'm going to say a bit of Spanish. Au revoir, bonne nuit.
Even French, well done, Manas.
Sorry, sir, I meant to say French. It's very late here in India. I'm so sorry. I meant to say French. Thank you so much for your time, Julian. Thank you. See you, bye-bye.
You've messed it up, Manas. You one chance, you've messed it up.
Hey, listen. In my defense, this is my third language, okay? And I tried for a fourth, and I fumbled, and I screwed it up. It's all right, guys. It's all right. But very interestingly, David, he mentioned that they would rather face Manchester City. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. I think I was just thinking there when Julian was talking, because it makes a great point. I mean, we're talking about the Champions League final here. We're not talking about an average game of football. We've got whoever gets through in tomorrow's tie, two of the best teams in Europe playing in a final. So they should be able to handle themselves to a degree. I just think the way that City play with so much possession, Kevin De Bruyne can find holes, of course, at his best. But I think there'll be a lot of defending, which is something that Inter won't mind too much. It's just whether or not they've got the pace on the counter-attack. And if Dzeko's playing, he hasn't necessarily got that pace. Whereas Real Madrid, I don't think they'll have to weather so much pressure. I think it'll more be about counter-attacking with the likes of Vinicius, if you like, and not so much the pace from or Valverde, if you like. I think Madrid would cause them more problems, put it that way. I think they actually quite like to play Man City.
That question to Don and Adriano later, but a bit on AC Milan, Don. Just didn't happen for them over the two legs.
They weren't good enough, Manas. They weren't. That's the simple answer. You get off to a bad start and you're 2-0 down inside 15 minutes, and let's get it right. It could have been worse. Mkhitaryan hit the post. They had a penalty claim. The tie could have been out of sight within half an hour. So I think if you asked Pioli after the first game, he wouldn't admit it, but 2-0 seemed like a result for them because, as I said, it could have been done. And they started okay in this game because the dynamics of the game meant Inter could sit off and Milan could try and have a little bit of confidence, enjoy a tiny bit more possession. But when you've got these, I wouldn't even say half chances, you've got to try and find a way of sticking one in the back of the net early, and then that gets the Inter players under pressure. This is the small wins that they had in the game, the likes of Tonali when he was driving forward, and this has got to go in. If that's on Brahim Diaz's left foot, he probably scores. In hindsight, he could take a touch. And after that, they were scratching really, Manas. They didn't really create too many good chances. I thought if you asked Inter to go up a gear, I think they probably could. But when you're sitting on a 2-0 lead, it's quite an easy game to manage. And I think we're going to look now at some half chances. Yeah. And as the clock was ticking on and as the players were getting more deflated and they knew what their fate was going to be, you were watching it Inter side fully in control.
If we speak about Rafa Leo as well, they needed the big players to step up. That didn't happen. If you drive a manual car, David, here in India, we have first, second, third, fourth, fifth is is obviously the max that you go, but you hardly go here in India, especially here in Mumbai. And today it felt like Rafael Leao just didn't even hit second or third gear.
Fifth gear? Would your cars have fifth gears in India, man? There isn't anywhere that you can drive faster than 20 miles an hour. He struggled. He struggled. I mean, the beginning bit, he just looked like he didn't realise he was in an actual game for some reason. I say that respectfully. But there was nothing really in his overall movement that suggested that he was match fit. And which is understandable because the guy has only just come back from injury. Put it this way, Manas. Their more important game, I think, was on the weekend than it was tonight, because they had to qualify in the top four, obviously finish in the top four to qualify for the Champions League next time round. They weren't going to be favourites even if they won 3-0 tonight going into the final. So the fact that he couldn't be fit or even play a part on the weekend suggested that he was nowhere going to be fit for this one or right. And I also go back to Diaz's shot. When Diaz is shooting, Leao's the one who jumps over the ball, and I think he just gets in the way. I mean, this is a one glimmer of hope here. Little wiggle of the hips. I think Onana even saves a shot if it goes on target. But yeah, he really give him a half, bring him off. Like Julian said, second half he was just a passenger.
And same could be said about quite a few big names in the second half, Don, because they didn't turn up. You could see Sandro Tonali giving it his all, but they just ran out of ideas. They ran out of steam, and they didn't have anyone coming off the bench that could make a big impression in this game.
No, that's the problem, Manas. I go back to match day one in Serie A and trying to predict who I thought the champions of Serie A was going to be. I thought it'd be Inter because they've got the best squad in Italian football. That's by a distance. They have got the best squad. So, you know, if you rewind the clock about sort of a month ago, Inzaghi was a manager well under pressure. You know, they were finding themselves at the top four. They were finding themselves not really pushing. They were 20 points behind Napoli, and Napoli winning the Scudetto by a mile. The manager was under pressure, but this has certainly helped them. So I think when you look at what Inter have got going forward in terms of their balance, they've got an incredible squad. But from Milan's point of view, I just think you're looking at a team that needs so much investment, and it needs more. And it's not the money; they need investment in terms of being cute and finding the quality. And we mentioned the free transfers. You know, you can shop smart. There's Edin Dzeko's out there, but if you're AC Milan, you're dealing with a 36-year-old Olivier Giroud. You're asking a 41-year-old Zlatan Ibrahimovic to try and perform. You're asking a free transfer like Divock Origi. There's a reason why Liverpool let him go. Messias has never really been, in my humble opinion, an AC Milan player, and he was one of the poorest players on the pitch tonight. They have got the jewels. You know, they've got the jewels like Tonali, like Magic Mike in goal, obviously Leao, so they've got them, but they've got to build on that, and they've got to make sure in the summer they lick their wounds, spend on quality, and go again.
But do they have now the finances? Because they won't be in the Champions League. It looks like it, because they have to overcome a 4-point deficit with just 3 games to go. That will be very detrimental to their near future, Don.
Well, it will. I mean, that's sort of stating the obvious. I mean, they might have been in a European competition, the Europa League, but it's nowhere near the glamour and the money of the Champions League. So, you know, it's just incredible. And they're trying to compete with some of the biggest clubs. When you see the spend, and you look at Man United, I mean, you know, I'm not even sure Chelsea's on that list, and they've done £600 million in 2 windows. So Milan haven't got these sort of this revenue. They've got to try and be cute. And David touched on the point before, to find balance in that between keeping San Siro or moving on. But the problem is with moving on is they're not going to move on and share a stadium with Inter. When they move on, they're going to build their separate stadiums. So what's that going to cost? That's going to cost $500 million. So all of a sudden, you know, a future for Milan, if they move away from San Siro, could be very bleak.
But the stadiums, David, aren't they owned by the municipalities over there? So the match revenue that they generate, it doesn't go to the club, does it?
That's a very good question. I don't know the situation at Milan. I have to say that. I know with Juventus that they had a government-owned stadium, and that's why they ended up buying their own one. But again, like Delle Alpi, I mean, Stade Delle Alpi was a classic stadium. I've been and seen a Champions League semi-final there, funnily enough, and all the atmosphere, but it was just no good for modern use. So that's another avenue which they'd have to look at, and investment would have to go into a brand new stadium, and then you would lose all the heritage. But in the end, man, as time moves on, and as I say, if they're going to invest in that stadium, they need to do it pretty sharpish. If they're going to build another one, then they're going to have to even think about that even quicker, because the amount of time it takes to turn that around. They're in a world of pain if they don't qualify for the Champions League this year. And like I said, the game against Spezia on the weekend, I think, was more important to the club going forward than trying to beat Inter tonight. But obviously, it's a big game, Champions League semi-final.
And they've lost both. Yes. Don. And Ralf Rangnick was linked to the AC Milan job. Maldini and company decided not to go with him, and they stuck with Pioli, and he ultimately won them the Scudetto. I personally feel it's now time to stay with Pioli, back the manager who's got them success. Where are you on this topic?
I'm the same. I mean, Ralf Rangnick's not the oracle on football. He proved that when he was at Man United. I think he's better off served, I think, at a higher level. If you want to tap into what he can do in terms of bringing players in, I totally understand that role. But in terms of the manager, you're making a change, I think, for change's sake. I think Pioli's a very good manager. You know, this time last year, he was winning the title. So, you know, you don't become a bad manager overnight. He needs the tools to work with. If you're trying to amalgamate, you know, an Inter Milan and an AC Milan team, there's probably 3 or 4 max of Milan players that would get in the Inter side if you amalgamate 11. So it's obvious what they need, and it's not just the money. You don't just need to say, right, we're going to spend 250 million. You've got to make sure, like we looked at the list of free transfers and Romelu Lukaku on a £8 million loan deal. You know, it wouldn't even surprise me if Lukaku went to Milan in the summer. That's feasible. We're not sure if Pochettino in the conversation will happen with Lukaku and his representatives in weeks and months to come, whether he wants to stay at Chelsea. Don't forget, he'd done that interview which burned a lot of bridges at Chelsea. So with the Chelsea fans want him back. So when you talk Italian football, you know, you're probably looking at, you know, Dusan Vlahovic is at Juve. So if you're Lukaku, your choices are, do I stay at Inter if they want him, or do I fancy going across to Milan and representing both Inter and Milan? That's something to have in your CV.
Yeah, that's something Balotelli has done, Zlatan has done as well. That would be very interesting. But on a very, very positive note, I think we should end it on a positive note, gentlemen, because Inter are into the final. Just how important and how big is it for Italian football? David, I'm so sorry. Don, I know you're born in England as well. I'm so sorry to remind what happened in the Euros final. They won that. Now they have a finalist in the UEFA Champions League. AS Roma could make it in the Europa League. Fiorentina are involved in the Conference League as well. We're seeing the resurgence. Just how big would it be for someone like an Inter who don't have a sponsor on their shirt to actually win it?
Yeah, I think, Manas, this is massive for European football. Not just Italian football. I think this is massive for European football for all the reasons that we're talking about negatively, haven't got money. If you've got trophies, then people will join in. Like what Don's saying, if you're offering a young up-and-coming player the opportunity to play Champions League football with a side that can win trophies, then you're going to do it to put it on your CV, rather than just join the club that you know you're not going to play a few years for and end up, I don't know, earning a bit more money, possibly. But yeah, for European football to have Italian teams representing in semi-finals, in finals, means that the game is good in Italy, and it means that people have an opportunity to go there to achieve and to be seen ultimately. Hopefully, if they play Man City, they play really, really well and get beat 4 or 5-0 with Haaland. Have I already gone on to the final here? Sorry, Manas, I'm getting ahead of myself. No. Genuinely, it'll be fantastic for Italian football, but I think more importantly, it will be better for European football that an Italian side does well in these European competitions.